My name is Ethan Walker. I'm 36, and the night my mother told me she was giving the house, I spent $720,000 to save to my sister. Something in me went cold. Chloe smirked, told me not to come to her wedding, and Mom acted like I should applaud. They didn't know the deed hadn't been theirs for years. They didn't know the tents they ordered the wedding, they planned the loan, they tried to take all of it, was illegal without my signature. And they definitely didn't know the police would soon confirm it. But what they didn't know was, before I continue, tell me where you're watching from, and hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by family, even in the smallest way. Because when the people who raised you turn their backs, it hits deeper than any stranger ever could. Your support helps more than you know. I grew up in a house that always felt a little too small, not because of the square footage, but because of how tightly the air seemed to press around me. Maple Ridge Lane looked friendly from the outside, white siding, blue shutters, azalea bushes that bloomed loud pink every spring. But inside the walls carried an uneven history. Some memories glowed warm. Most didn't. I didn't know it then, but every crack in that house was already shaping the way I learned to swallow myself. When I was 8, I remember a Sunday dinner where Mom served pot roast on her good plates, the kind with tiny golden rims she only used when guests came over. We weren't expecting anyone that night, but Chloe sat beside her, only 5 years old, wearing a pink dress with lace sleeves. Mom kept reaching across the table to put the best cuts of meat on her plate. Meanwhile, she slid the overcooked edges toward mine. I didn't say anything. I chewed slowly, pretending not to notice the difference in color and texture, but it carved deeper than I understood. I didn't know it back then, but this would matter later. When you're a kid, favoritism isn't a concept. It's a temperature. It's the feeling of a room cooling the second you enter it. At school, I once won second place in a regional science fair. Not first, not something flashy, just second. I came home holding the ribbon like a small miracle, excited to show my parents. Dad barely looked up from the TV, football blasting through the living room speakers. Mom glanced at the ribbon and said, "That's nice, honey," before turning to Chloe and reminding her to practice piano for her recital. Chloe grinned, sat at the piano and played scales, loudly enough to swallow the moment whole. I hung the ribbon on my bedroom doorknob. No one asked about it again. I got my first job at 14 bussing tables at Miller's Diner. The place always smelled like burnt toast and cheap coffee. My hands would come home sticky with syrup, my shirt stained with grease I couldn't wash out, when customers left crumpled $1 bills as tips. It felt like treasure. At the end of the night, I'd fold my small pile of cash, tuck it in the metal tin I kept hidden under my bed, and tell myself I was saving for the future. What I really meant was maybe one day I'll be worth noticing. By 17, I was working 2 jobs, morning shifts at the gas station, night shifts at the diner. Most weekends, Chloe borrowed money from my stash for movies or pizza with her friends. "I'll pay you back," she'd say. She never did. Mom always insisted it was normal sibling stuff. But every time I handed Chloe a bill I'd earned wiping down tables or sweeping parking lots, something in me tightened. Thanksgiving when I was 19 was the turning point I didn't see coming. Snow had started falling early that year, dusting the cracked street outside our house. I walked in after a long shift at the gas station, hands numb from pumping fuel in the cold. Inside the house smelled like cinnamon and roasting turkey. Chloe was already showing off her Christmas wish list on a shiny clipboard, a new laptop, designer boots, concert tickets. My list had 2 things: scrubs for my CNA clinicals and a used laptop for schoolwork. Mom read her list first, nodding along, smiling wide. When she got to mine, she skimmed it and said, "We'll see." And I swallowed it the same way I swallowed everything back then, believing endurance was the same as love. I didn't know it then, but all those tiny cuts were teaching me a lesson I'd pay for years later. College didn't feel like freedom. It felt like a shift change. I traded the clatter of diner plates for the harsh buzz of hospital hallways. I entered pre-med with 2 things: a scholarship that barely covered tuition and a part-time job cleaning bedpans in a nursing home. The air always smelled like antiseptic and loneliness. At night after my shift, I'd sit in the parking lot, forehead pressed against the steering wheel of my beat-up Honda headlights, flickering like the car was trying to give up before I did. I didn't know it then, but these long nights were teaching me how to survive on nothing but stubbornness. During my sophomore year, I came home for Christmas half exhausted and 5 pounds lighter. The house looked exactly the same flickering porch light, same warped step that caught your foot if you didn't lift it high enough. Inside, the heat was cranked too high, and the living room was glowing with multicolor string lights. Chloe was opening presents, surrounded by piles of glossy wrapping paper. I recognized the shape of the box before she even tore the paper, the newest MacBook. It cost more than my rent. When she ripped open the packaging and squealed, Mom clapped like she was watching a magic trick. I got a pair of socks and a $20 Subway gift card. Dad handed them to me without making eye contact. "We didn't know what you needed," he said. I forced a smile, said thanks, and folded the socks neatly. Later that night, I sat in the dark kitchen eating cold ham straight from the container, my reflection in the window barely recognizable. I swallowed the moment, but it settled like a stone. Residency was another world entirely. I lived on caffeine, adrenaline, and fear of killing someone by accident. Nights blurred into mornings, patience coded, bones snapped. The hallways hummed with machines that never slept. During one brutal 30-hour shift, I remember leaning over a stainless steel counter in the break room, head pounding. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, making everything feel slightly unreal. My phone buzzed. "Mom." I almost didn't answer, but guilt picked up for me. "Ethan," she said, voice thick with dramatics. "Your sister needs help with a class deposit. It's just a little bit. You're a doctor now. You can afford it." I wasn't a doctor, not yet. I was a barely functioning resident with $200 in my checking account, but I transferred the money anyway. Chloe texted me a single heart emoji. I didn't hear from her again for weeks. I didn't know it then, but that one transfer would start the pattern that eventually crushed me. Years passed like that. Money out, silence back. When the recession hit and my parents' mortgage ballooned, I was already an attending surgeon, finally making real money, finally breathing a little easier. But the call from Mom that night still sliced straight through me. She cried so loud, I had to step into an empty supply closet at the hospital just to hear her words. "They'll take our home, Ethan. Think of your father. He can't move at his age. Please, please help us." I remember the smell of saline latex gloves and my own sweat. I remember the hum of a vending machine beside me. I remember saying yes before she even finished the sentence. Saving the house wasn't a single heroic moment. It was a series of slow drownings. I paid off a lien from a contractor I'd never met. Then a second mortgage my parents forgot to mention. Then delinquent property taxes. Every time I thought it was the last crisis, another envelope appeared stamped urgent. The house became my responsibility in every way except name. In those years, I dated someone, Laura. She was quiet. Warm always smelled like lavender lotion. Some nights she'd trace the lines under my eyes with her thumb, whispering, "You've got to slow down, Ethan." But every time I tried to pull back from my family, another crisis dragged me back. A broken water heater, a missed payment, Chloe needing money for a venue deposit. Laura left after 2 years. She packed her things in silence. Her last words were soft but sharp. "They don't love you. They use you, and you let them." She walked out the door, and I didn't stop her. I didn't know it then, but that loss was the first crack in the version of myself they depended on. All of this, every forgotten celebration, every quiet disappointment, every dollar handed over without thanks, was pushing me toward a breaking point I didn't see coming. Not until the night my mother said she was giving away the house I'd sacrificed my entire adulthood to save. The shift from subtle favoritism to open exploitation happened slowly like a leak under the sink. You don't notice it until the floorboards swell. It began with small asks, small lies, small shifts in tone, and it grew teeth. By the time I realized how bad it was, the damage was already deep under the surface. The first real fracture happened on a rainy Tuesday. I had just come off a 12-hour shift, my scrubs damp with sweat and disinfectant. I sat in my car in the hospital parking garage, forehead, resting against the cool steering wheel. The rain hammered the metal roof like an impatient hand. My phone buzzed. "Chloe." I answered without thinking. "Hey, can you send me $300?" she asked. No greeting, no explanation. just expectation. For what I muttered, too tired to filter anything. She sighed, the dramatic kind. Can you not interrogate me? It's for school. God, I transferred it. When I came home 2 days later, I saw her Instagram story, her holding a cocktail neon lights behind her captioned girls' night. She was wearing the exact top she claimed she needed for her class presentation. I didn't comment. But the bitterness sat in my throat until it burned. Months later, I came home for 4th of July. The air smelled like grilled burgers and citronella candles. Fireworks popped in the distance. We sat in the backyard, the string lights glowing soft yellow, Dad flipping burgers while Chloe scrolled on her phone like the world existed exclusively inside that screen. Mom handed Chloe a small wrapped gift just because. Chloe opened it and squealed a designer wallet, expensive, new, shiny. I got a folded grocery receipt with Mom's handwriting on the back. Pick up milk, cereal, and batteries before you leave. Dad laughed like it was a harmless joke. I laughed, too brittle as dry leaves. But inside, I felt something twist. I didn't know it then, but that moment would come back to haunt me. Another crack appeared during Chloe's short-lived MBA attempt. She called me during a lunch break while I sat outside the hospital eating a protein bar I didn't even want. Ethan, she said, voice syrupy. I need $900 for my textbooks. They're insane this semester. No problem, I said automatically. Send me the invoice. She paused. I'll just text you the total. Send me the invoice. My voice was calm. Too calm. She hung up. 10 minutes later, she texted, never mind, she found a cheaper option. 2 weeks later, I saw the real reason when Chloe posted a picture at a weekend cabin getaway. A hot tub, champagne, perfectly manicured nails. The caption, self-care weekend. I deserve it. I stared at the screen so long my lunch break ended before I took a breath. Thanksgiving rolled around heavy with cold air and frozen driveways. The house smelled like sage stuffing and apple pie. Chloe breezed in wearing a white coat that screamed money. Mom complimented it 3 times. Dad asked if it was warm. I asked where she got it. She shrugged. You bought it, she said casually. What you sent me money for winter school supplies. I bought this and boots. Look, she stuck her leg out like she was showing off an award. Mom laughed. She's young Ethan. Let her enjoy life. I swallowed the sting, but it carved deeper than I thought. By the time the house crisis hit, mortgage and shreds liens piling like dirty laundry, I was already numb. Mom called crying like she had rehearsed it. They're going to take everything, she said, everything your grandfather built. Do you want that on your conscience? It wasn't a question. It was a weapon. And I let it cut me. I wired thousands before finishing the call. I told myself I was preventing a catastrophe. I didn't realize I was enabling one. I didn't know it then, but saving that house would become the rope they tried to hang me with. A few months after I paid the biggest chunk, $210,000, I came over for dinner. Meatloaf night. The oven heat made the kitchen feel suffocating. I sat at the table exhausted, listening to Chloe talk about her wedding plans. We're thinking a backyard reception, she said. Here, it'll be rustic and cute. Pinterest vibes. Mom nodded happily. Isn't that lovely, Ethan? And you won't have to worry about travel. I blinked. Backyard here. Yeah, Chloe said, rolling her eyes. Don't be weird. This is our family home. Our home. I had funded every nail holding it together. The words tasted metallic. I didn't say yes to that, I said quietly. Mom waved her hand. Don't be dramatic. We're not asking you for anything. Chloe chimed in. Except maybe for you to help clean the porch before guests come. Dad's back is too bad for heavy lifting. Dad flinched but didn't speak. The room felt hot, too hot. I pushed my water glass aside. I'm not approving a wedding here, I said. Silence fell like a brick. Chloe scoffed. Approving? You don't own the place. My throat tightened. Actually, Mom cut me off. Don't start. This is our house. How dare you act like you have a say? My pulse pounded. I didn't say anything else. But the truth was already lodged under my skin. I didn't know it then, but this backyard argument was only the first match. Someone was about to strike it. 2 weeks later, I got a bill from a landscaping company, $1,800, wedding pre-prep. I stared at the invoice, trying to steady my breathing. I called Mom. What is this? I asked. Oh, don't fuss, she said. We're just getting the yard ready. You make so much money. This is nothing. I hung up slowly. I could feel the shaky edge of something breaking inside me. The worst blow, though, came from Dad, quiet, tired, guilt-stained Dad. One afternoon after my shift, he called me. His voice was low. Son, your mother has been talking about signing the deed over to Chloe, just so she has stability. My blood went cold. You mean the house I saved? He hesitated. She doesn't see it that way. Those words didn't just cut, they gutted. I didn't know it then. But that deception would come crashing down at the dinner table under dim yellow lights with the smell of burnt garlic in the air. And it would destroy whatever was left of the version of me they thought they controlled. The breaking point didn't arrive in one dramatic explosion. It arrived in a series of quiet moments, each one sharp as a paper cut small enough to ignore, deep enough to sting for days. But together they bled me dry. One of those moments happened on a Sunday morning in early spring. I stopped by the house to drop off a new smoke detector because Mom said the old one was acting up. When I walked in, the living room was filled with wedding magazines open on every surface. Ryan sat on the couch like he already owned the place, feet up on the coffee table scrolling through his phone. Mom barely looked at me. Oh, good you're here. Can you also check the leaky faucet upstairs and maybe mow the lawn? We're busy planning. I asked. She gestured to Chloe and Ryan. They're making big decisions. You can handle the small stuff. I stared at the faucet dripping into a bucket, the magazines, the markers, the color swatches. It felt like they were decorating the inside of my bloodstream. Chloe didn't even glance up. We're thinking of building a little arch in the backyard, like a permanent altar, for future family events. My jaw clenched. Future events? She shrugged. Thanksgivings, baby showers, maybe our kids' birthdays. This house is going to be the heart of our branch of the family tree. Ryan chuckled. Yeah, man, it's perfect. Rustic charm with potential. We could even add a deck later. A deck on the house I owned, without asking me. I didn't know it then, but that conversation would replay in my head when everything finally cracked. Another incident hit 2 weeks later. I got a call from a credit card company asking to verify charges linked to my name. When I checked the account, I saw it $642 at a bridal boutique, $300 at a restaurant I'd never been to, $120 at a spa. I called Chloe immediately. Why is someone using my emergency card? I asked. Oh my God, calm down, she said. Mom said it was okay. It's for emergencies, Chloe. She scoffed. It was an emergency. My bridesmaids' dresses got delayed, and we needed to pick new options. That's not an emergency. It is if you care about the wedding. There it was. The sentence that summed up my entire childhood: if you care, you'll pay. I froze. For a second, the air leaving my lungs. You're taking advantage of me. She didn't even hesitate. So what? You'll make it back in a day. You're lucky. Lucky. I hung up without another word and canceled the card. Chloe texted me 5 minutes later, way to be dramatic, but I wasn't done being blindsided. One evening, Mom invited me for dinner. The moment I walked in, I felt it something rehearsed, something staged. The lights were dim, the table set too neatly, the food steaming like a performance. Dad looked exhausted, picking at his chicken like each bite weighed something. When dessert came out, Mom cleared her throat. Ethan, we've been thinking, she began. A terrible sentence to hear from anyone, but especially from her. It's time Chloe has some stability, she continued. She and Ryan deserve a foundation to start their life. We're gifting them the house. My fork stopped midair. Chloe grinned. We're going to renovate the kitchen and maybe the floors. I want something modern, and don't worry, you can still visit like a distant cousin. Dad wouldn't look at me. His silence was its own betrayal. Mom kept going. It's symbolic. Your grandfather left it to us, and now we pass it to the child who will keep the family line strong. The child, meaning Chloe, always Chloe. My pulse thudded in my ears. You're giving away a house you don't even own, I said. Mom narrowed her eyes. Excuse me, Chloe scoffed. Don't start. But I didn't speak again, not then, not yet. Their delusion was too deep, their confidence too unshakable. They believed the lie completely. And the worst part, Dad had let it happen. He had let Mom build this fantasy knowing the truth. Knowing the deed was no longer in their name. That betrayal was different. It didn't hit fast. It seeped into me slowly like poison under the skin. I didn't know it then, but that night set everything on fire. The moment Mom announced the house transfer, something inside me finally stopped trying to fix to appease to endure. I walked out with my hands shaking and my chest tight, but I also felt a strange clarity I hadn't felt in decades. Still, the hits kept coming. A week later, a notary called me by mistake, confirming a deed signing appointment at my parents' house, an illegal deed transfer they had no right to attempt. When I called Dad, he avoided the truth until I sent him a photo of the stamped county record. He replied with one word tonight. We met in the garage, the place he hid when Mom was in one of her moods. The smell of old tools, oil stains, and stale cigar smoke filled the air. He sat on a plastic cooler, elbows on his knees, eyes on the concrete floor. I didn't know how to tell her, he whispered. You didn't tell her at all, I said. You let her build a fantasy. He winced. She wanted to give Chloe something big. She said you already have everything, everything. The word echoed against the garage walls. Everything except a family that cared, except boundaries, except the right to say no. Dad rubbed his face with both hands. She'll explode if she finds out. She will, I said. But she'll explode even harder when the reality hits her in front of everyone. And that was exactly what would happen. I didn't know it then, not fully, not deeply. But the dinner where everything unraveled would be the moment I stopped bleeding for people who loved the damage more than the healing. The moment I realized the house wasn't the only thing they'd taken from me. The night everything detonated didn't feel cinematic at first. It felt ordinary, which somehow made the explosion even louder. The dining room was warm with oven heat, the same dim yellow light bulb humming above us, flickering once every few seconds like it couldn't decide whether to stay alive. The table was set the way Mom loved it, cloth napkins. Cheap wine pretending to be expensive silverware, polished too aggressively. The smell of burnt garlic clung to the air, mixing with lemon detergent and the faint scent of Dad's aftershave. But underneath it all was something else, a tremor, a shift in gravity. I felt it the second I walked through the doorway. Mom sat at the head of the table, posture, rigid eyes sparkling with something performative. Chloe was in her usual spot, engagement ring, catching the light every time she moved her hand. Ryan sat next to her like a man who had already claimed the territory. Dad sat across from me, shoulders pulled tight, staring at his plate, like it held bad news he didn't want to read. We weren't even halfway through dinner when Mom gently set down her fork and folded her napkin slowly, deliberately, like she was conducting a ritual. Ethan, she said, voice soft in a way that meant danger. We have something important to tell you? My stomach nodded. What is it? She breathed out through her nose, preparing her performance. We've made a decision, your father and I. We're signing the house over to your sister as a wedding gift. The room stilled. Even the flickering light seemed to freeze in place. They looked at me like they expected applause. Chloe leaned back, smirking. And just so we're clear, Ethan, don't come to my wedding. It's for immediate family. Ryan chuckled under his breath, the kind of laugh that said he thought he'd won something. My pulse thudded steady and loud. I tasted metal at the back of my tongue. I forced a smile. It came out crooked cold. Dad, I said, quietly, do you want to tell them? Or should I? His fork slipped from his fingers and hit the plate with a sharp, embarrassing clink. His eyes darted to Mom, then to Chloe, then back to the table. Mom frowned. Tell us what? What is this? Chloe scoffed. Are you seriously doing this right now? Another lecture. I didn't blink. Dad. He swallowed. His Adam's apple bobbed once, twice. His voice barely crawled out. There's nothing to tell. I let the silence expand until it pressed into every corner of the room. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I'll tell it, I said. I placed the phone on the table gently, almost tenderly, like I was setting down a newborn truth. With a few swipes, I opened the photo album labeled House. Every document, every transfer, every notarized signature I'd saved for years. I turned the phone so they could see the stamped county deed, the LLC certificate, Dad's signature on the occupancy agreement, wire transfers totaling $720,000. Mom squinted at the screen. What is this, the reality, I said? The house is legally mine, has been for almost 2 years. Dad signed it over because you were drowning in debt, and I paid for everything. You don't own it. You can't gift it. You can't host weddings or events here. This isn't yours to give away. Chloe laughed, too loud, too sharp. Oh, please, that's fake. You think we're stupid? She tapped the screen with her acrylic nail. This is Photoshop, Dad, I said. He closed his eyes. His shoulders slumped. When he spoke, his voice was small. It's true, he whispered. Ethan saved the house. It belongs to him. The world didn't explode. It crumbled quietly. Mom's mouth fell open, then shut, then opened again. She looked betrayed not by the lie she'd lived in, but by the fact someone finally shattered it. You went behind my back, she choked out at Dad. You did this without telling me he didn't answer. That was answer enough. Chloe pushed her chair back so hard it screeched against the tile. So what? You're stealing our inheritance. You're punishing us because you're jealous. My laugh was low, humorless. Inheritance? Chloe, this wasn't going to be an inheritance. It was a foreclosure. I saved you from losing everything. Ryan stood abruptly, palms flat on the table. Man, this is insane. You're ruining her wedding. You couldn't just let this go. I looked at him. You tried to host a wedding in a house you don't own. Mom slammed her hand on the table, wine sloshing over the rim of her glass. How dare you, she snapped. How dare you humiliate us like this? You embarrassed yourselves, I said softly, by trying to give away something that never belonged to you. The light flickered above us again, buzzing, like it couldn't handle the tension. Chloe's face twisted into fury. You're not invited to my wedding, she spat. You're dead to me. My chest tightened, but not with grief, with clarity. Then don't expect the house, I said, or the yard or the porch or anything with this address. If you show up with a tent crew, I'll call the police myself. Mom gasped, like I'd slapped her. You're a monster. No, I said, I'm finally done. Dad looked up at me, then eyes glassy, not with anger, but with something like shame. Maybe relief, maybe both. And sitting there under the warm light that kept flickering like a dying heartbeat, I felt something shift inside me, something cold, steady, final. A smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. Not warm, not forgiving. A cold smile. Because the truth was finally on the table. And this time I wasn't the one who should be afraid of what came next. The days after that dinner felt strangely silent, like the world had been holding its breath and finally exhaled. I didn't hear from Mom, not a single call or text. Chloe posted vague quotes about toxic relatives and protecting your peace, which would have been funny if it didn't sting in a place I'd ignored for years. Ryan unfriended me on every platform, as if that was some sort of punishment. Dad sent nothing at all, not anger, not excuses, just quiet. The kind of quiet that meant he was finally facing the fallout of his own choices. I stayed busy at the hospital, suturing wounds, setting fractures, fixing what was broken in other people, while my own family tried to pretend I had never existed. Some nights when I walked through the dim parking garage with its flickering lights and humming pipes, I thought about that moment at the table, Dad's fork dropping, Mom's shocked silence, Chloe's disbelief collapsing into rage. It replayed in my head like a scene I hadn't finished watching. Then 5 days later, I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, the voice on the other end was all business. This is Officer Ramirez with Greenwood PD, he said. I was told to inform you that someone attempted to schedule a tent installation again at 114 Maple Ridge. Your tenants insisted they had permission. Before I proceed, I wanted to confirm with you directly. I felt the smile before it reached my lips. Cold, controlled. I kept my voice even. They do not have permission. In fact, I'll forward you something. I hung up and opened the folder on my laptop, the one I'd built quietly, methodically, long before any of them realized what I was capable of. Digital copies of the deed, the lease, the occupancy rules, photos of every violation, every unauthorized charge, every attempt to use my name, my money, my credit. They thought they had destroyed me. But they had just handed me the one weapon I needed proof. Not anger, not revenge, in the theatrical sense, but paper. Paper that spoke louder than any accusation. And for the first time, I understood something simple. I didn't need to fight them. I just had to let their choices catch up to them. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, hit subscribe and stay with me. Stories like mine aren't rare. They're just buried under years of guilt, silence, and pretending everything is fine. And if you've ever been pushed to the edge by the very people who were supposed to protect you, know this: you're not alone. And you're not crazy for wanting boundaries. This story isn't over, not by a long shot. And if you're still here, still listening, still breathing through the hurt, then trust me, you're stronger than they ever believed.